look back in your life and remember a defining moment?
Yeah.
I've had many defining moments. I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan. I had a wonderful childhood. That's me, the little one, in here, as I grew up. It was beautiful. Wonderful family. I would run around on the streets of Kabul, running errands for my mom, and I felt safe. Everybody looked after each other. But all of that changed overnight. We were at home and we heard gunshots. We ran outside and we realized something was wrong. The Russians had invaded. And at this point, we were afraid that they were going to knock the doors down and we were going to be the next victims. Everything had changed. So at nights, my mom would turn off the lights so our home was not targeted for bombs. She would make us sleep in the corners of the room, so if the bomb did hit, we would survive. And the streets were filled with tanks. I remember throwing pebbles at soldiers in retaliation. That's all I could do. And so the situation got really dangerous, and my mom decided that it was safe for us at home. So she pulled us out of school. I was the youngest. And then my dad was living in America at the time. But when he heard about the news of the war, the first thing he did was send my brother and his wife and my cousin out of the country. Then he returned, risking his own life to protect ours. When he returned, everybody was after him because they thought he was a spy. At this point, the atmosphere changed. You no longer felt safe. The neighbors were telling on each other. We became enemies. In the middle of the night, my mom woke us up and said, "We're gonna leave. Don't make any noise. There's a car waiting for us outside. Just take what you have and go. We're gonna be invisible," basically, because we didn't want our neighbors to know because they could turn us in. So the only few things that we got was one, watermelon, served as food and water, as my dad would say. And another thing were a few photos that we could take with us, because that's all we had. I remember boarding the car, and the lights were off, and we were moving. I turned around, looked in the rear window, and I could see myself, my life, everything I've known, my best friend Medina, whom I never saw again, left behind. And then at this point, I turned around and I looked forward, and all I saw was an uncertain future. Didn't know where we were going, and all that I could feel and sense around me was fear of death. I was too young, too naive to realize what that meant. I kept thinking to myself, I know it's gonna hurt when I die. But I had no idea what would happen after I died. Long story short, we boarded the bus in central Kabul, and we were all wearing, we were all wearing burqas. And because again, we were hiding. And that was the first time I had worn a burqa. It was hot. I was sitting there next to my sister. My mom and dad was sitting in front of us, and she started crying. And all I could think about was not throwing up because the fumes were so strong. And I was nauseous. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "My dad in front of us told my mom that the commander, the Afghan commander, had just boarded the bus, and he was going to look for evidence, because that's something that happened on a routine basis. So he was going to look for evidence, and whoever had the evidence of escaping, they would take the whole entire family, line them up against the bus, as an example, shoot them down." So he said that he's going to come and search, and he's going to find the pass. My uncle, his brother in Ghazni, where he grew up, had given him a pass so he can safely pass through Ghazni. But we never thought there was going to be such a huge detriment for us where the soldiers were concerned, where the Russians were concerned. And the commander started walking forward, and our hearts started beating faster. And then he stopped, and he looked behind us. He turned around, whispered to the soldier, and left. And we could just relax. His own sister was behind us, and she also was escaping the war. And so he let the whole bus go. But that's not where the journey ended. We were on to go for almost 2 weeks with no water, no food, through the mountains, onto donkeys, walking, climbing the mountains, mostly behind the pickup trucks. I mean, there were several families. We were poor, so we didn't have a guide. My father became our guide. He was strong, he was powerful, people were afraid of him. But there were other families that were rich, that had hired a guide. What really stands out in my mind, and this is where I learned the power of language. Language became our currency. Was on the border of Waziristan, which is a very, very dangerous place. There was a mountain. We were sitting on the mountain. Remember, we hadn't eaten or drank water. I remember looking through the crevices of rocks in the mountains, trying to find water that was there from the night before, from the rainfall. We would go, push away the debris and the bugs, and we would indulge, not knowing when we were going to get water again. We're sitting there, and there was the other family that were there with their guide. They had jewelry underneath their burqas. You can tell they were rich. There was an old woman who was walking behind us who lived on the mountains. Very humble home with no furnishing. And she had one thing that we all wanted, a jug of water. And as she walked, the other family started talking to her, and she just looked at them, ignored them, walked away. I guess they were trying to say, hey, we can give you jewelry, we can give you money. And she just walked away. She came to pass us. My mom, who had nothing, looked at her and said, Singa hai, in Pashto. How are you? She looked, she stopped, she said, you speak Pashto? She says, yes, my name is Pashtun Gul, the flower of Pashtus, Next thing I know, she says, come. She took us into her little mud house, 1 bedroom. She had just freshly made a small portion of fresh spinach and potatoes. She shared that with us, bread and water. That was the most dangerous part of the country. And yet that's where I learned love and bond through language. After crossing over to Pakistan safely, I mean, I can go on about this forever, but we lived in Pakistan, in Islamabad. And this one, the second one. As you can see, look at our faces. We're sad. Look at my face. Kind of, I didn't know what to do. but I could see my mom being really sad. We were stressed out. We had no money. None of us went to school for almost 2 years. We didn't go to school. We didn't work. We were just waiting for our papers to come to America, the land of opportunity. And my brother had lived here before us because he escaped before us. So he sponsored us, and finally we got the news that, hey, you can come in. And this is when we came to America. I remember on the way to America, I'm thinking, as soon as I get off the plane, they're gonna hand me money. Because all I saw were movies of Clint Eastwood. I was like, either I'm gonna have a horse and a cowboy hat, or I'm gonna go to New York City full of light and glitter, and it was gonna be lit up all the time. So as soon as we got off the plane, the first thing I noticed was I was scared of escalator. We'd never seen it before. The next thing I noticed is that we were headed to our 2-bedroom, 1 small bath, roach-infested ghetto apartment in Arlington. There was 12 of us living in that apartment. That's where I developed my asthma, roaches. So what happened is that's when I learned that I had to assimilate to the culture. I had to learn the language. One of my defining moments was my first day in school. I had missed 5 years of school altogether. And my brother was driving me to Thomas Jefferson Intermediate School. When he stopped, he was in a rush to go to work, he handed me a piece of paper and says, go. I said, what do I say? What do I do? I can't even speak English. I don't even know the English alphabet. He says, just say hi to people you know and say hello to people you don't know and just go. So I just clenched, because the paper was all I had. So I clenched onto it, I walked through the doors, and I saw all these students embracing them, each other, because it was their first day of school. And I kept saying, hello, hello, And then the bell rang, and I had no idea what the bell was. Everyone disappeared. And I'm still standing there. Hello. With a piece of paper, and then after a while, this tall lady walked forward, talked to me. I didn't understand her. She took the piece of paper out of my hand, and she walked me to the classroom. That was my first ESL classroom. As I took a deep breath, sat behind my desk, I looked back at my life, and I said, up until this point, everything had happened to me without my control. sitting behind my desk, I was in charge. I was going to make things happen in my life. So I had to learn the language. I had to assimilate to the culture. And I did really well in ESL classes those 2 years. Then we moved to Alexandria. I went to T.C. Williams High School. That's when the problem started. When I went mainstream, I was behind academically. I still couldn't speak English very well. I didn't have study skills. I didn't have time management skills. No one at home could help me. So I just left all my books in my locker and did nothing. I don't know how I passed high school, seriously. But then that's when the depression set in. I was caught between two different worlds, the American culture and the Afghan culture, right? And I didn't know where I belonged. All my sisters had arranged marriages, they all went away. I had no one to talk to. I couldn't have friends outside of school because I wasn't allowed to stay after school. And that's when I decided I was going to kill myself. So I was working at Kmart. This is around when I was like 15, going on 16. And I worked at Kmart, and I remember that whole weekend, the Friday, Dr. Nicholson at T.C. Williams High School said to the class, you know, come to class on Monday with your homework, or this and that, or I said to myself, I'm not going to be alive on Monday, so I don't have to do your homework. So I didn't do the homework. I worked at Kmart, and I was in a daze. I remember buying a lot of medication. I came home, and I laid it out in front of me in the dark room, and I was going to take every medication there was, and I was going to go to sleep, and I was not going to wake up. And at this point, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was my mom. She said, no one and nothing in this world is worth your life. You're too precious. And that's when I found my best friend. I turned around, threw myself in her arms, and we became best of friends. And one of the advice she had given me, and I don't think that she ever realized how powerful it was, she says, write down your feelings. So I went and I bought an old typewriter, the kind that you probably don't even know about, Stephen King's, you know. I started typing about who I was, what my life was until then. Now you gotta call it diary, I guess. And all of a sudden, these words, it felt like they were floating in front of me. I was astonished. I felt powerful. I was self-actualized. I said to myself, all the kids at school, they were making fun of my clothes that I buy in Salvation Army. They made fun of my accent. They made fun of my, my lifestyle. But none of them could survive 1 second in my shoes and go through what I had to go through. And I felt powerful, and that's when I realized I was the bomb, And all of them were weak. So I went into this back to school with no homework, thinking, I got this. But it still didn't do anything for me academically. And everyone was studying for their SATs senior year. I didn't, because I thought I was not smart enough, because I couldn't barely pass high school. I wasn't rich enough, because I was a poor refugee. And no one in my immediate family ever went to college, so how am I going to go to college, because I knew nothing about it. So I started doing what I was doing all along, but I started working when I was 14. I went and started working, continue really putting all my energy into work. And I became the manager of a health club, and I thought I had made it. I was on top. I was making money, respect. At age 19, I had made it. But then there was a void inside of me. And that's when I ran into my best friend, Thea, from high school. She was going to Nova. She said to me, you should go to Nova. And I said, Nova? What's Nova? She said, it's a community college. And I said, let me go tell my mom and dad. So I went to my dad and my brother, and I said, can I go to Nova? And they said, Nova? No, absolutely not. You can't go to Nova. And because you're going to get a boyfriend, and no, you are going to have an arranged marriage just like the rest of your sisters. And that's it, because my dad said there are 2 ways you leave my house. On your deathbed or on your wedding bed. Choose. So I was defined because I had that void within me, that itch. I couldn't scratch. I said, no. I said, okay. So I went and applied to Nova. I started taking classes. I would work all day, go take my classes at Nova, go home, eat and sleep. When everyone else went to bed, I'd get up, and on the kitchen floor with a little lamp on, I would study. till early in the morning before my dad woke up. So I did this for almost 2 years. And then finally he caught me and he kissed me on my forehead. He said, "Good for you, you're not pregnant." And he said, but he said, "You can't leave my house." And I said, "Okay, I've gone this far." Then I got my acceptance letter from different universities, and the one I wanted to go to was JMU. So I chose JMU. I was so excited. I packed everything. No, I went to him first, and I said, "All I need is your blessing, because I'm going for my future." And he knew there was no fighting, so he kissed me on my forehead again. He says, "Go." So I packed everything I had in my CRX, and off I went to JMU. I was excited as I sat behind the desk of my advisor, waiting for him to tell me how I'm going to do well in my CSD program, Communication Science and Disorders. Because I wanted to be a speech therapist, because I knew the power of language. I wanted to help people. So he sat there, he rushed in, he sat in front of me. He didn't even look at me. He just went through all the papers. No, 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 no. I'm like, "What?" He says, "No, you don't have what it takes to be in this program. Drop out." Better yet, he looked at me, he says, "Drop out of JMU. You don't have what it takes. Find another university, which is easier." And I just sat there like, "What? You're defining who I am based on a bunch of numbers and letters? I'm much more than that." So I said, "Thank you very much." I took my folder from him. I walked down the hall, and I said, "I need a new advisor." I got a new advisor, because going back home was not an option. You know? So I got a new advisor, and Miss Runyon, the best advisor ever. 2.5 years later, I was graduating. And I was outside, and it was a beautiful sunny May day. I was deciding, should I go outside to a ceremony or inside to CSD? And I hear a voice, a very familiar voice. It was my advisor. He said, "Aren't you going to go in? You're going to be late." And I turned around and I said, do you know who I am? Do you remember me?" He says, "No." I said, "I am the person who sat in front of you, and you told me to drop out." I said, "Today, I'm telling you that I'm proving you wrong. I'm graduating with 2 degrees. And he was like dumbfounded. And I said, "You have no idea. I was more than those letters and numbers. I have a few, past. I was determined." I walked away from him, and he was in shock. And then I graduated, and then I became a speech and language pathologist for 4 years. I saw a great need in the area of reading. Then I decided to go to Virginia Tech for my graduate degree in curriculum instruction with a reading specialty endorsement. I became a reading specialist for a few years. Then I went to DC, and I became a literacy coach. I was training teachers how to teach. And then I started working at Nova Adjunct. And I've been here for 10 years, now 6 years full-time. A couple years ago, I was a speaker at Dr. Biden, Joe Biden's wife, Jill Biden's event. And at the time I was looking at this picture, when I was creating this PowerPoint, I thought to myself, there would have been, if that 12 or 13-year-old little girl, the refugee that just came to America, would she have ever remembered, would have ever thought that one day I'll be working side by side with the vice president's wife? I felt like I finally made it. We're colleagues. We teach the same courses. I felt really proud. About 1.5 years ago, my father passed away with a heart attack. And after the funeral, I went to his little room. I sat at the twin-size bed, and I looked around. My sisters were rummaging through his stuff. And one sister took his reading glasses, another took his prayer rug, a Holy Quran, another took his shoes that still had imprints of his feet. I didn't want anything. I was just in daze. And my brother walked in, and he gave me a huge bag. And he says, "This is for you." I didn't know what was in there. And I went home, and I emptied out the bag, and I sat there. I was like in shock. It was all of his handwritten writings, his journals, his speeches that were published on BBC, articles that he had written that were published both in Pakistan and in America. He was a writer. And I was his legacy. And I sat there wondering, did he know that I was his legacy? And before he passed away, he kissed me on the forehead and he said, "I'm very proud of you." And I think a part of him knew that I was his legacy. And now it's my turn to carry that torch. But my journey is not over. I'm not standing here just to tell you my story. I'm here because to let you know that there are thousands, millions of refugees out there, right? They have amazing stories that would put my story to shame. But they don't have one thing that I do, a voice and a platform. And they too, one day, can be where I am, right? Achieving the American dream. They too can contribute to the world. And I tell my students that life, like college, doesn't take a lot of brain, because I didn't have a lot of it, but it takes a whole lot of determination. I gained my freedom and my independence and my power through education. Now, as an educator, I am here to give that same power to my students. Thank you.